Hi, this is Dina for Splitcoaststampers. In this video, I have some ideas for upcycling old rubber stamp blocks into ornaments. These are already complete with artwork, which makes our prep work that much easier. I've removed the stamp from this block to use in my stamp positioner, so it's ready to go. What I want to do first is to find the center of the block at the top and the bottom. So I need to measure the width and thickness and create a little cross there where those two lines intersect. I also took some time to clean off the adhesive that was a bit raised on the back of the stamp. If you just have sticky residue there, that's fine, but you'll want to remove anything that's raised up. I've got some goopy glue here, or you may have some foam that tore away and stuck to the block. I was able to get mine off with a scraper and a little rubbing alcohol. And I used a scrap of paper to cover the back of the block. You can stay simple like this, or you can create some little layers on the back if you like. My block was sticky enough here to hold the paper, but you could use a gel medium or Mod Podge or any white PVA glue to hold the paper in place. I just stuck the block in place on the paper and trimmed around the edge with scissors to cut it to size. Once that is done, there are some options for adding embellishments depending on what tools and supplies you have available. I'll start with the simplest option because I know not everyone has a drill press at their disposal, so this design can be done without drilling. I'm using a 10-pound twine here. You can use twine, string, thread, or narrow ribbon. You just need to be sure that whatever you use will be able to double up and still fit through your bead holes and your button holes. For my 2x2 block here, I cut 24 inches of the 10-pound twine. If you're using a different size block, you'll need to measure around the edges and then add the length that you'll need for your loop, your beads at the top and bottom, a couple of knots, and then just some extra length so you have some ends to hang on to. Start by folding the twine in half to find the center. And then I'm going to tie an overhand knot to create a little loop at the top. Mine here is about 1.25 inches. I'm starting with a little seed bead that has a smaller hole that's big enough for the two ends to fit through, but it won't go over my knot. And then I have a couple of random beads that match the design on the front of the block. I'm going to put each end through a buttonhole, and this button is nice because it's flat on one side, and I want that flat side toward the block. I'm going to pull the twine nice and tight through the holes and out to the sides. Add a little dot of hot glue to the center of the block, and then press the button down onto the top of the block so the twine is centered out to the sides of the block. I didn't measure this block, but I have my grid mat underneath it to help me get things in place and centered. The twine wraps around the sides of the block down to the bottom, and then I'm going to do the same button trick to secure the twine at the center on the bottom. So I have the flat side of the button up toward the block, and each end of the twine goes into a hole. I'm going to add my little spot of hot glue, pull the twine tight, and glue the button and twine into the center on the bottom of the block. Next, I have a couple more beads to thread onto the twine, and I want to end again with a smaller bead that will hold my knot in place. So there's another seed bead. A trick I like to use for getting knots nice and snug: start your knot and then tuck your tweezers down through the loop that you made and grab onto the twine where you want your knot to rest. Then pull the ends and the knot will work itself up to where you're holding on with the tweezers. And these bent pointed tweezers are really great for knotting. You can cut the little tail short or add a few small beads to them if you like and knot them separately. So there is the non-drilled option for the project if you don't have access to a drill press. This is a block that I drilled with a drill press. Maple wood is pretty hard, so do a little research first for what kind of setup and speed you'll need to drill correctly to avoid burning the wood. The bit that I used is 3/32, and that's plenty of room for twine or 18 gauge wire, whichever you choose to work with. For this design, I used 18 inches of twine. Again, this is the 10-pound twine, and you will need to adjust your length for the size of your block and take into account the loop, your beads or other embellishments, the height of your block, and your knots when you measure out your twine. Again, you'll create a loop with an overhand knot. String on a small bead to hold the knot, and then some larger ones. String the twine through the hole in the block. Add some beads down below the block. And then knot the twine tightly to secure everything in place. Again, for that tweezer trick, make the knot, put the tweezers through the loop, and then grab onto the twine where you want the knot to rest and pull the knot tight. Because the beads don't quite fit the curve of the hourglass side of the block here, I did end up going back in and adding a tiny dot of super glue to hold those washer style beads in place. So you may need to do that too, depending on your design. For a third option here, I'm going to use wire instead of twine. And here I have 9 inches of 18 gauge silver plated wire for the block that I have here. I like to give myself about 1.5 to 2 inches for each wrapped end, and then additional length to accommodate the beads and the block. So this is a little bit more than that, but that's okay. I'm going to use chain nose pliers to create a 90-degree bend in the wire about 1.5 inches up from the end. And then I'm going to use round nose pliers to create a round loop going in the opposite direction from the bend. So I grab the wire next to the bend on the short side and wrap the wire over the round, and then turn my pliers slightly so I can complete the loop around. After that, I'll grab onto the loop with my pliers to hang on while I wrap that little tail around the wire to create a wrapped loop. Trim off the excess at the back and use your pliers to squeeze in the end so it doesn't catch on anything. And then the wire is ready for beads. At the bottom, I'm going to create another wrapped loop. So I'm going to make the 90-degree bend again, and I want that to match the direction of the top one, which will go front to back. With my round nose pliers, I'm going to make a loop in the opposite direction of the bend. I want to hang a charm in my loop on this design, so before I wrap the end of the wire around, I want to open up the loop and slide my charm on. Then I'll close it up and wrap the end around the wire and the spacer beads, and then trim it off. I have a decorative hook for this one to finish it off, and I like how that looks. Yay! I have one more bonus project for doing the wire a little bit differently. For this one, I have 12 inches of wire. I'm going to start from the bottom of the ornament and create a little loop on the wire with my round nose pliers. And then I'll hold that loop in my chain nose pliers to keep it flat while I wrap the wire slowly around that little loop to make a small spiral. Then I'll give it a little bend so the spiral sits nice and straight below the beads. I'll stack my beads and my block from bottom to top. And again, I'm going to make a 90-degree bend at the top, but I want a larger loop at the top to be my hanger. So I just grabbed a bottle nearby that was the right size, and I'm going to use this little bottle of alcohol ink for my form to make a large round loop at the top of my ornament. When that's done, I'll wrap the end of the wire around my central wire to secure everything in place. And then I added a little piece of tied silk ribbon to fancy it up a little bit. So there are 4 ways to upcycle a wood stamp block into an ornament. If you've got a little stash, these would make cute gifts or even craft show items. Thank you so much for watching, and happy holidays.